Wyandotte Creek Groundwater Sustainability, a regular board meeting. Please join me in a pledge of allegiance. Ready? Salute. Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, please call the roll.
Kyle Daly.
Here.
Bill Connolly.
Late.
William Bynum.
Here.
Bruce Riston. Here. Janet Goodson, I note as absent. And is there anyone else? No. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody need to change anything on the meeting minutes?
Actually, Chair Connolly, the meeting minutes aren't in there. We didn't get them done
Okay.
in time for the posting, so
To be
we'll pull that.
continued,
Yes.
All right. So next up is presentation and consideration of proposed new monitoring network locations.
All right. So thank you, Chair Connolly, board. We have here today. We have Ryan Fulton from Larry Walker and Associates, who will be giving a presentation about the new monitoring network. Ryan, here's the clicker.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's see. It looks like this is working. So I'm Ryan Fulton. I'm a water resources engineer with Larry Walker Associates. Also here today is Eddie Teasdale with Ludorf and Scalmanini Consulting Engineers. I'll be providing an update on the proposed monitoring network enhancements for the Wyandotte Creek Subbasin. And before I begin, I just want to recognize DWR. Without their funding, none of this work would be possible. This is completely grant funded. So let's see, next slide here. Whoops. So during the presentation, I'll be talking about the project objectives, the overview of the existing groundwater level monitoring network, and different aspects of the monitoring network that we're recommending, and end with next steps. So the objectives of the enhanced monitoring network is to address data gaps identified in the Wyandotte Creek GSP and DWR's determination letter. We will be improving monitoring for all beneficial uses and users of groundwater, including interconnected surface waters, or ISWs, groundwater-dependent ecosystems, also referred to as GDEs in the presentation, domestic well owners, and agricultural users. We'll be spending a lot of the time discussing the first two, interconnected surface waters and groundwater-dependent ecosystems. Through the SGM grant that the GSA received, there's available funding to drill a minimum of 15 shallow wells, 3 multi-completion wells.
Can you get closer to the microphone, please? We're old and deaf.
All right. And install a minimum of 5 stream gauges. There's also funding to equip 10 domestic wells with monitoring equipment. Okay. And as I go through any of the slides, if you have questions, feel free to ask.
So how do you expect to get access to all those different wells? Are we going to reward people some way, or are they just going to invite us on, or what's the plan?
Yeah, well, we haven't started the outreach component yet, but there are a few landowners that have came forward and volunteered some property, and we're going to work with just other partners that maybe have land for us to install.
Just thinking ahead, maybe we need to reward them some way.
Yeah.
If you can't find enough volunteers, just an idea.
Yeah.
Do you gentlemen, do you know 10 other people?
Yeah, we are also looking at county easements, installing wells along those easements.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll get a phone call, the county stealing our water, but it's okay. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Yep, feel free to ask questions as we go along. So this is a map of the existing groundwater level monitoring network. This is directly from the GSP. There are 13 wells, part of the existing monitoring network within the subbasin. The network provides groundwater conditions in the principal aquifer. The problem with the existing network is that it does not account for the different aquifer layers. It assumes groundwater aquifer is essentially a large reservoir, and groundwater levels go up and down depending on the time of the year and current hydrology. In reality, the upper and lower aquifer layers may be separated by impermeable layers, and so you may get difference in response in the upper versus shallow aquifer layers. So our goal is to develop a monitoring network to track groundwater levels in the upper layer for interconnected surface waters, GDEs, and shallow domestic wells, and then have a separate monitoring network to track groundwater levels in the deeper aquifer. And this is to monitor groundwater pumping because, as you know, a lot of the groundwater pumping occurs in the deeper aquifer layers. Okay, so go on to the next slide. So we partnered with Todd Green at CSU Chico and LSCE to classify existing wells as part of your monitoring network. They used information on the wells such as screen interval and well depth, and used DWR's AEM surveys to characterize the geology to classify the wells as deep or shallow. The figure on this slide shows a sample cross-section from the AEM surveys. The map on the right are the flight lines from DWR's AEM survey. The blue line corresponds to the profile section that's viewed on the map. In the aquifer cross section, the blue indicate clay soils with low permeability, and the red indicates gravels and sands with higher permeability. Shallow wells are screened in the upper aquifer, also known as the Laguna Formation. And on the map, you can see there's a line that is indicating the base of the Laguna Formation. And the deeper wells are screened in the lower aquifer, and that aquifer is known as the Ione Formation. And you can see on the map there's a line that indicates the top of the Ione Formation. Okay, so I'll go on to the next slide. So this is the proposed monitoring network for the upper or shallow aquifer. There's also a map, I believe, in your agenda packet. That's the entire page that you may want to reference. It would be a little bit larger, easier to see. But this map focuses on monitoring specifically for ISWs and GDEs. Let's see. So ISWs were identified using results from the Butte Basin groundwater model. They are shown on the map with the blue. I'm looking at the map here. With the blue, green, and yellow lines on the map. The blue lines represent gaining streams. So water is moving from the groundwater aquifer into the stream. They're gaining. The yellow lines on the map represent losing streams, so water is moving from the stream into the aquifer. And then the mixed or the green lines represent streams that are transitioning from gaining or losing depending on the time of year as groundwater levels fluctuate. So those are where interconnected surface waters are occurring in the gaining and mixed streams. The groundwater-dependent ecosystems are delineated on the map using a coverage provided by Department of Water Resources. It's also called the natural communities commonly associated with groundwater. It's a coverage that DWR released to help GSAs comply with SGMA. And these areas are shown on the green shaded regions on the map. So as I mentioned earlier, our goal is to monitor around the ISWs and GDEs. And so there are 8 existing wells that were included in the GSP that are considered shallow across the subbasin. And those are on the map, the yellow dots on the map. And there's one multi-completion well in the subbasin that has a casing for the upper aquifer. We're proposing 15 we're proposing 15 new shallow wells. These are indicated by the blue circles on the map. Again, these aren't exact locations. These are just kind of general vicinity of where we want to put the wells. Our next step is to reach out to landowners if there's willing landowners within that region, or look at county easements for the exact location. But the blue areas represent the general vicinity of where these 15 shallow wells would go. We're recommending 3 multi-completion wells. That's indicated with the pink colored hexagons on the map. One in the north near Oroville, one on the border between Butte and Wyandotte Creek Subbasin along the Feather River, and then one kind of central southern portion of the subbasin. Okay, and then we're recommending 5 stream gauges across the subbasin. Those are indicated with the blue dots on the map. And these stream gauges were located to support ISW GDE monitoring, recharge project implementation, and also to support refinements to water budgets and the Butte Basin groundwater model. Before we leave here today, we would like your approval of these general monitoring locations. That's one thing we're asking for you today. So if there's no questions, I'm happy to move on to the next slide. Okay. So this is the proposed monitoring network for the deep aquifer. There are 3 existing deep wells classified by LSC and Todd Green. These are indicated with the green triangles on the map. We're proposing 3 multi-completion wells, same as from the previous map. Each multi-completion well will have a casing to monitor the upper, a casing to monitor the deep, and then another casing that will be screened in both layers to have a combined groundwater level. So this will be the deep aquifer monitoring network when we're done installing the wells. Yep, go for it.
Will those multi-completion wells be, I'm trying to kind of corral my thoughts here, sorry. Are these going to be 3 separate ones, or can they be part of the 8 or the shallow wells? Like, will we just build 3 multi-completion wells, and then with those, that will account for 3 of the shallow new ones that we want to build? That's not making any sense. But
I think I understand what you're saying.
They have
there.
to be separate, like infrastructure. Can those account for some of the same ones, or are they different locations?
They're different locations. What we're proposing, there's available budget to have separate, but if we're looking for costs, ways to kind of reduce costs, we may try to combine locations and reduce the number of sites. Yeah. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit and talking about domestic wells. So LWA conducted a domestic well survey using parcel use classifications available through the county's assessor's office. Each green dot represents a parcel likely to have a domestic well. We excluded parcels within urban water suppliers as they most likely are served by that supplier, their potable water. Through this analysis, we've identified areas with the highest density of domestic wells, what we're referring to as priority areas. These priority areas will be the focus of a community monitoring plan, where we'll be installing continuous sensors on these domestic wells to track groundwater conditions. So far, within Wyandotte Creek, we've had 8 domestic well owners come forward and volunteer their wells to participate in this program. DWR periodically monitors 5 other wells, and these may be candidates to incorporate into this monitoring program to go from periodic measurements to continuous measurements. Okay. So we would like to install continuous or real-time monitoring at all the new monitoring locations that we install under this grant. And this will allow the GSA and other water managers and well owners the ability to view their data online in real time. And so this slide summarizes costs and different equipment options for monitoring. For groundwater level monitoring, we typically use two different sensors. The first one, the upper picture on the right, is an Eno Scientific. It's a non-contact sensor, where it's just mounted on the top of the casing. Nothing's lowered down the casing, potentially contaminating the water. It uses sonar and measures depth to groundwater that way. The second type of sensor that we use is a submersible sensor, and we lower it down the well casing, submerge it below the water surface, and it measures the water above it. These sensors are generally the preferred method. They're a little less noisy, but for domestic wells, we would prefer not to send anything down the well, potentially contaminating their water, so we use the Eno Scientific for that case. Installation costs for these equipment range from about $6,500 to $11,000 per site. It depends on the site, kind of where you fall within that range. For Eno Scientific, on a domestic well, you're on the lower end, about $6,500 per site. If it's a multi-completion well with 3 casings, you need 3 sensors, so you're on the upper end, about $11,000 per site. Once you have the equipment installed in the field, there is an ongoing O&M responsibility that comes along with that. That's between $1,000 to $2,500 per site per year on average. Some years it may be less if you're just going out replacing batteries. Some years it could be more if you have to replace a sensor, for example. So on average, it's about $1,000 to $2,500 per site. For stream flow gauges, the cost is up to $35,000 per site to install. About $15,000 to $20,000 of that is the equipment, the actual equipment that you install in the field to measure, typically at stage, how deep is the water flowing within that stream. And then the remainder of that $3,500 is used for developing a stage discharge curve. And so to do that, crews have to go out in the field and manually measure flow rate and correlate to stage. So at this stage, flows this much, and you have to go out maybe 3 to 5 times to get a good, accurate rating at various flow rates within that stream. And so, similarly to groundwater level sites, there's an ongoing O&M cost that ranges between $4,000 to $8,000 per stream gauge site. That's to maintain the equipment over time, and then we also recommend going out to the sites at least once a year just to validate that the stage discharge rating is accurate. So we want to make sure the site's accurate over time. Okay, so I'll go on to the next slide here. So this slide summarizes total costs if we were to monitor all the new sites. The installation costs are covered by the grant and through the grant terms. And then after that, it would be the GSA's responsibility to maintain the sites if you desire to do so. So across, I'll just read a couple total. So there's 33 sites that we're recommending we monitor. To install the equipment, it's about $383,000, and that's grant funded. And it's about $73,000 per year moving forward to maintain those sites. And that's ideal. Ideally, the GSA would maintain the sites moving forward. You want to have a good historical record of different flows just for understanding baseline conditions. The GSA would have, at your discretion, the ability just to abandon the sites and say, we have data now, let's utilize it, we can learn from it. but we just don't have the funds to maintain the sites. We could look for partnerships. I think DWR is investing a lot of funds into implementing these sites. It's to their advantage to keep these sites moving forward. So there might be an opportunity to collaborate with them on the ongoing O&M cost of the sites.
Can the grant funding be utilized for maintenance costs going forward, or does it have to be specifically allocated for like construction and design?
Yeah, the grant funds end April or March, April of 2026. So after that, it would be your responsibility to maintain the sites.
Okay. Got it.
I'll just add to that a little bit. So just as a reminder, in the GSP, the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, it did identify data gaps. And so some of the things that we are and need to look at more closely are the interconnected surface waters and impacts to groundwater-dependent ecosystems, and to improve or enhance the monitoring network. So looking at these opportunities with the grant, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Grant Program, to install some of these, this infrastructure, and then also, we're pursuing CalSIP, right, for stream? Not for this one? Okay.
Not for Wyandotte.
And so being able to utilize those grant funds for the infrastructure, but yes, ongoing maintenance, operations and maintenance would be the responsibility of the GSA. And typically, O&M is not included in many grants, so long-term. The previous budgets, and I would have to go back when we were adopting the fees, did include some monitoring, not specifically this amount of O&M. We would have to revisit that when we go to adopt the budget in the future. If you recall, you do have some contingency, and we do have room in the amount of the fees that have been adopted to where that might be covered in the fee that's already been adopted. So we can reevaluate that when the time comes.
Right. Okay, that was my next question. All right.
Yeah. So as far as next steps, today we're looking for your approval of the monitoring sites. But from there, we would start to get access agreements in place and develop the bid documents to hopefully bring on probably 2 well drillers, one for the shallow wells, one for the deep, come early next year, with the new wells being drilled by June of 2025. Stream gauges, they can be installed as soon as we get your approval. We can start identifying locations and ordering equipment and get those going. So that's kind of the immediate next steps there. So with that, happy to take questions, but otherwise looking for your guys' thoughts.
Well, I have a thought.
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
this is exactly what we wanted when we first formed.
Yeah.
And if this is what's happening statewide, then that would be an incredible asset to understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's outstanding.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
I like the plan.
Thanks.
So there's a need for
Yeah.
that could be recharged.
Yep.
Also, is there a way we could do projects at the same time? We have to put in
Yeah.
the stream gauges. I mean, I know several people have approached me, they're willing. And the problem I have is that it's all clay, all runs off, and then it floods down towards Highway 70, especially Wyman's Ravine. But each one of these streams become terrible this time of year if it rains enough. Palermo's a mess. So could we look to combine things?
I think that we are in directly. Ryan is also working on the regional conjunctive use project for Wyandotte Creek GSA project, and then we have been collaborating with the Palermo Master Drainage Plan, as well as looking at even just the Clean Water Consolidation Project. So we are taking that kind of multi-benefit approach to collaborating for information and not operating in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Because the water all ends up down by Highway 70 and it
Right.
overwhelms people's houses.
Yeah.
Well, at least their yards.
Yeah. So as Cami mentioned, we've been collaborating with the Palermo Drainage Master Plan. Wes Yost is leading that project. And we met with them earlier this week and showed them this map of the shallow monitoring network of where we're going to put the stream gauges. And they thought the two near Palermo that we have recommended will help projects in that area. So we're trying to combine that. And then we've met with South Feather Water and Power Agency a few times and have some project concepts. More discussions are needed. But there's a stream gauge on the eastern boundary along Wilson Creek that may be helpful to support recharge out of South Feather's Bangor system.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Any public comment on this? All right, you did good. Are you next up again?
So, Chair Connolly, we're looking for an action to approve the proposed monitoring network locations or give any other direction.
I don't know how you can make, I'm confused a little bit, so explain it. How can you make those locations like concrete? Because have you actually have willing landowners to let you do it?
I think those areas are just general areas where we want to put the monitoring network, and we'll approach landowners in those areas. And then if we don't find landowners, we'll also again look at any county easements that might be available or adjust the location of the network. I think overall, it's really what we're looking is just the confirmation that this looks like a good plan, this number of monitoring locations, and generally what has been presented versus, and kind of taking into consideration the cost associated with it. If you all were to look at that and say, absolutely not, we're not spending a dime more, then we'd be taking a different approach. So it's kind of just approving the whole concept.
Just thinking out loud on these streams, there's people that would like to have a pond on their property, and if it retained enough water so there was some use, maybe water their cattle or whatever, or recreation. I'll give you a few names after the meeting of people you could approach, because it seems like if there was a carrot, it would be easier. That's my concern. Not everybody's as nice as Bill. Wants science to come forth.
I think a carrot's a good idea. Make it retroactive. That'd be even better.
Yeah.
But
I'll also add.
I didn't say a gold carrot. I was thinking an orange one. Yeah.
I think Kelly would say, our water resource scientist would say, that there's just the relationships that we have with the existing well owners where we monitor wells and being able to provide them data, that it's always been a very collaborative relationship. So I think once people know the benefit and what information that we can also share with them, it always seems to work as well. But to your point, to an incentive.
Questions or comments? I'll entertain a motion.
well, I'll move that we approve the proposed monitoring network locations.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It's unanimous. Good job.
Thank you.
Next up is presentation of sustainable water management grant projects progress. Becky Fairbanks.
All right, just as this is Becky Fairbanks, she's the GSA program coordinator and kind of overseeing the administration of the grant program in collaboration with the GSA program manager and staff. So she'll just provide an update on the projects. If you recall, she was here a couple months ago at the last meeting, providing the initial update, and she's just going to tell you where we are.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here today. So yeah, just a little reminder, the Department of Water Resources, DWR, had grant funding available through their Sustainable Groundwater Management Grant Program. And so Wyandotte Creek applied for, and we were awarded about $5.5 million for our different proposed projects. The board also approved the approach to work with Butte County Water and Resource Conservation to lead portions of the grant-funded work. Okay, so the different projects that we're implementing through this grant include the data gap identification and data improvement project. There's an outreach task. There's also a regional conjunctive use project. There's project management and grant administration, data management system enhancements, and interbasin coordination analysis and modeling. And then I should say there was also the Thermalito Water and Treatment Plant capacity upgrade that was completed back in April that we touched on this last summer. Okay, so data gap identification, this is what Ryan just spoke on with LWA. We recognize that we need accurate data, right? We have all these data gaps within the subbasin, and if we have more data, that will be helpful as we try and make better decisions about our different resources. So we want to invest in new monitoring sites, including monitoring equipment. And then we're also going to be responding to the DWR's determination letter that came along with our GSP. That's part of that project also. So the updates on this project, updates that we're going to be covering all today, start from April 1st this year. That's when everything started, and then goes through September 30th of this year. So this project is on track and within budget. And again, Larry Walker Associates is our consultant on this project.
Close it. Oh, we can't close the door.
What they've done so far is you just kind of saw Ryan's presentation, right? So they've been looking at the different data gaps in the subbasin, trying to figure out where would be good opportunities to install new wells or the stream gauges. And then they've also started reviewing DWR's determination letter, including the public comments to help us respond to that. So their next steps, you just saw today, he just presented, right, the map, and thank you. We got your approval to move forward with that. And then it's going to be doing the bid documents, getting access agreements, working with landowners and or county easements so we can find places to really finalize those locations, and then going out to bid and by spring start constructing the wells. This is actually a task within the Data Gap project, but we wanted to kind of highlight it on its own. So outreach, and it has its own consultant, Raf Tellis.
I'll be right back.
Okay. Should I just wait?
Yeah. Supervisor Conley, there's a flood in the basement. That's what they're working on.
Hey, you know what? It's a way to get something done, right?
I said put a piece of tin under there. Yeah, we'll give him. It's not your fault. Cutting a pipe off to put a pipe on it when I said, why don't you slip a piece, it's just a roofer by trade. A piece of tin would work for now. Looked at me like. Oh, that's better, huh? Maybe you did get it quieter.
A little quieter.
Yeah. I didn't look real mean or anything, I guess. All right, let's try it again.
Okay, so outreach, this is, it's just a task within that Data Gaps project, but it's to help us get like education and outreach materials for everyone within the subbasin, right? And then also to help us have those outreach materials for the different projects. So Raftellus is actually working with us on this project, and what they've done so far is they've created a style guide. And what we mean by that is we want to have consistency in our different outreach materials. One thing, if I don't know if you guys have noticed, but our logo is now vectorized. So it looks pretty much the same, but it's a little clearer and it's scalable. So we can actually change the size and still read what the logo says. They've met with all the consultants for the different projects. One, to kind of learn what the projects are about, but then two, to identify what kind of materials would be helpful so that we can help people understand about the what we're doing here. So their next task is just to kind of finish creating the different materials, and then they'll also be helping us with the website. Okay, so the Regional Conjunctive Use Project, this focuses on reducing the dependency of the subbasin on groundwater, and there's 3 different approaches. So the first 2 are just like studies, like an analysis, and one is an intrabasin water exchange study, and that's going to be working with the different water purveyors in the subbasin to see if we can utilize or like divert their surface water to the different people that are like outside of their service area but still within the subbasin. The second is an agricultural surface water supplies and recharge study. And this is just trying to see if we can get like ag users to utilize surface water when it's available rather than pumping the groundwater. And then there's a precision irrigation efficiency pilot program. So this one we're actually going to implement a pilot program. And it's to just kind of increase groundwater sustainability by decreasing consumptive use. So Larry Walker Associates is our consultant on this, and Ryan kind of touched base a little bit on this when he was just speaking. But some things that we've done so far is we've met with Thermalito Water and Sewer District. We've also met with South Feather Water Agency. We got to tour their facilities. That was pretty neat. We got to see their different conveyance systems. So we got to see in real time, not just like looking on paper, but like what their conveyance systems look like, what might be involved to, like if we wanted to extend the different canals or whatever to reach other people within the subbasin. It was a really neat opportunity for that. And then for the precision irrigation program, we formed an ad hoc committee. We've started meeting, like kind of designing like what the pilot project might look like. And so it's really taking shape. We're going to be working with Tehama County Resource Conservation District, RCD, and utilizing, they have a mobile irrigation lab. So what they can do is they can assess people's current irrigation methods. They can make recommendations for improvements, and then once changes have been made, they can come back and monitor and evaluate how well those changes actually worked. So our next steps, we actually had our first public meeting. It was like 2 weeks ago on November 7th. We had 7 people show up, but it was really neat. We heard from some people like that kind of like boots on the ground term. We heard from a well driller in Palermo, like where flooding's happening, kind of like what you were just talking about, Chair Connolly, about people that are interested, like how the stormwater is going, what are the different opportunities for possible recharge, and all that. And then, so we're also going to be, after the holidays, we'll kind of schedule some more ad hoc committee meetings. And then we also need to schedule some site visits for the people that are interested in the precision irrigation program. Okay, so project management and grant administration, this is just the task for like the overall grant that includes like invoicing, reporting, environmental information forms. What we've done so far is back in April, we hosted a big team kickoff meeting with all the consultants online at one time. We hold regular check-in meetings with our consultants. We process their monthly invoices as they come. We filed all the environmental information forms. We've also submitted all the contracts that are in line with the grant. And then we've submitted 2 quarterly invoices and progress reports so far to DWR, and we're just finishing up our 3rd one that'll be sent off hopefully by tomorrow. I'm going to turn it over to Christina, who's going to talk about the other 2 projects.
Good afternoon, Christina Buck. I'm the Assistant Director with Butte County Department of Water and Resource Conservation, and we are leading 2 projects on behalf of the GSA using this grant money. So one of those pieces is the data management system enhancements. This is really an opportunity to organize our way of both storing and managing the data that comes from these groundwater level monitoring sites and others, but also working with the consultant team right now to communicate to them what our reporting needs are. How do we interact and be able to pull out this information both for kind of internal thinking, but then also for summary and communication to the public. So the consultants have put together some preliminary examples of data reports, and we're continuing to work with them on refining those. Next steps will include thinking about what new data might be needed to incorporate into this system, including like the stream gauge data or other data that's generated by some of the other projects. So that's the current status. The second one that we're leading is interbasin coordination, analysis, and modeling. This project is jointly funded by this grant through Wyandotte Creek GSA and then also VINA GSA grant. And so the goal here is to better understand the system at the boundaries, related in particular to the rivers and streams and how they're connected to the groundwater system. Ryan talked about that quite a bit with these new shallow monitoring wells. But we're also interested in the water budgets and what's our estimate of flow across these boundaries. And so part of this project is to update the modeling tool that helps us come up with some of those numbers. And the idea here is that this data and information that comes out of this analysis will help support conversations between subbasins along the Feather River corridor. So we're in Wyandotte Creek, our neighbors, in Butte Subbasin, Sutter Subbasin, and the North Yuba Subbasin along that Feather River. So far the consultant team, which is Montgomery and Associates, and they subcontracted to Woodard and Curran, who's doing quite a bit of the modeling work. They've gathered a lot of the data and model files. They've begun to compile the contents of the groundwater sustainability plans in these 4 subbasins and put them together in kind of this massive spreadsheet, but also putting together more visuals, maps of how do we look at the different policies that these GSPs adopted in terms of groundwater level conditions, the minimum thresholds, the measurable objectives, those different pieces, and looking for opportunities to collaborate in this corridor. There's quite a bit of similarity in approach, and so I think it will help us to just identify where we might want to lean in closer when we think about collaborating on monitoring network or other things. But the information coming out of this work will help us, I think, fine-tune what that might look like in the future. So we have met with Sutter Subbasin folks and North Yuba folks. Sutter Subbasin also has a grant that they're just getting a consultant on board to work with them on their pieces. And North Yuba was ahead of the rest of the valley. They submitted their plan on the 2020 track, so they're actually about to submit their kind of next periodic evaluation. So it's kind of nice to have them in our corner because they're a couple steps ahead of us and we can learn from them and coordinate closely. So that is what is happening. We anticipate having a discussion with this core group on some of those preliminary results of the GSP analysis by the end of the year, and talk to the managers about how do we roll those out to the individual GSAs. So I think you can expect to see some of those results probably in the spring of 2025. So I think that's my last slide. Any questions for Becky or I?
No, it seems like the only place we would have trouble is to the south. So.
Yeah, we're in pretty good shape, and most of those 4 subbasins are. So it really is about the monitoring and just kind of making sure we don't mess up a fairly good system that we have.
All right. We don't need to take any action on that, right?
No, it's just information.
Okay. Consideration of, any public comment or any questions by the public? Okay, moving on. You guys good up here? Consideration of Sigma grant budget amendment reallocation of component 5 funds. Becky Fairbanks, you're up again. Huh? Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here. Okay, so just a reminder, we're talking about the grant that we were awarded $5.5 million for the projects. Just a side note, so in the projects, there was for the full grant, there is 5 different projects. Each project has its own budget. So one of those is a Thermalito water and treatment plant capacity upgrade. Its budget that it was awarded was about $2.3 million. This project began in May of 2022, and it just ended in April of 2024. As we started applying for the grant, this was back in the fall of 2022, and so things kind of kept changing, and when we got the final notice, there was a grant stipulation. There's in the guidelines that we could only invoice as far back as October of 2022. So this meant all that time and work from May of 2022 to October of 2022, we were not able to actually invoice for and be reimbursed for. So when we realized that we were in this situation, we contacted DWR to see what our options were. We first asked if we could still invoice and be reimbursed for the full amount because this was in our grant application and that was what we were awarded for. DWR came back and said, no, the October 2022 is a firm deadline. So there's about $780,000 that we have a balance of. And then we asked, what's the procedure with this? What can we do when we have this balance? Their guidance to us was that we can reallocate that balance to any of the other projects in our grant. And it still has to be spent by March 2026 when this grant comes to an end. So that's why we're here today, to see we have a proposal of how to reallocate those funds to the rest of the grant. So we are proposing to move about $14,000 to the data gaps project, specifically to the outreach task, just to kind of help better our efforts in reaching out to the people within the subbasin. We would like to reallocate about $32,000 to the interbasin coordination project, and that's specifically to task 3, which is the data management enhancements, and that'll kind of help staff with the admin of doing all that work. And then we want to allocate about $742,000 to the regional conjunctive use project. Now, doing that will help us expand on our efforts for the interbasin water exchange task, as well as the surface water supplies task. Okay, so we realize we're asking to move the biggest portion, right, to one specific project. There's a lot of benefits for this. One, it will allow for a more detailed approach. So currently, our contractor, it's in the contract only to do a 10% high level design, right, for the different design specifications or possible infrastructure updates needed to go through with those plans. If we do this amendment, it will allow the contractor to do up to 60% design plan. So that'll help us be further down the line for when it comes time to the next steps to find more funding. We would have a project almost ready to apply for an implementation part. We've also, I mentioned earlier in my project update, that we've been working with West Yost, who's the county's consultant on the Palermo Drainage Master Plan. And doing this will allow us to kind of further advance their conceptual designs that they've already done. So there's that great collaboration opportunity here. So this is what the current budget of the grant looks like. It just shows how the categories are in the grant, but then the budget categories. And then this is what we're proposing. So I changed the dollars into blue just to kind of have it stand out a little bit more. It's the light blue, sorry, not the dark blue. But so that's what we're proposing to do. So the data gaps you see, the outreach would kind of increase a little bit. The interbasin changes a little bit on D. But then you can see on regional conjunctive use for B and D and E categories would increase. And so 2 weeks ago, I took this to the Wyandotte Creek Advisory Committee, and there was a consensus among them to move forward with this approach and bring it to you here today for your recommendation and hopefully approval to amend the grant. And I will say, if you do approve this approach, then our next steps would be to go to DWR and get a new executed grant amendment, and then we would also amend our contract with LWA. Are there any questions?
I'm having difficulty understanding why we're spending $1 million on a conjunctive use plan that we'll never use. I mean, this basin's pretty healthy. We don't need to move anybody's surface water. We could use what we got. I see a whole lot of planning, not a lot of results. That's how I feel about it. I mean, there's nobody out. I mean, our wells aren't going dry. They're not going down. We're healthy. Why do we need to spend $1 million on a plan for something we don't need.
Well, I think it's a little more than just a planning document. So the combination of this project with the Palermo Master Drainage Plan project would also be more of an implementation project. So as part of that project, they're advancing some conceptual solutions to bring back to that community and identify ways to minimize the flooding in that community. And so part of the multi-benefit approach to these projects is to look at how we can move water during the flooding times from downtown, let's say Palermo, to another location, perhaps west of railroad tracks or further south, into Wyman Ravine and down
There's
and out.
There's already a grant for that.
Yeah, but only to a certain point for more of a conceptual kind of 10% design, versus this would actually help move that project even further down the line. And then the work that Ryan is doing is looking at moving either additional surface water flows. So one of the things is that South Feather Water and Power would very much like to be able to utilize some of their excess surface water within the Wyandotte Creek subbasin, because they do have excess surface water. So those that are relying on groundwater, we can use their existing facilities to perhaps move water into other areas within the basin that do not use surface water. So looking at both the Palermo system of South Feather as well as the Bangor, is it Bangor? System, thanks, the Bangor system, and looking at just conveying some of that surface water flow further into the basin. So I think there is an opportunity to improve the use of surface water, or expand the use of surface water within the basin, which would just improve the status of the basin that much more. And there are dry wells, as you know, within the Palermo community. So there is some concentrated areas of dry wells within Palermo.
They're very shallow, and they're going to be hooking. Well, April, the project starts to bring them domestic water.
Right.
So my problem is, I took over this job 20 years ago and found out that there was a well-designed drainage solution for Palermo back in the 70s by, I think, an engineer named Cook. And it was never implemented. Now, not long ago, a few months ago, we voted for the county to study and design a drainage plan for Palermo. I'm tired of plans. I want to see projects. And so you're telling me, I'm looking at this, we're throwing a lot of money at engineers to do plans. Am I being plain enough? I represented these poor people for 20 years. They're still flooding. They'll probably flood tonight if it rains again. I want to see a project.
Right.
I don't see a project. I see a lot of engineers making money. Sorry, it's not personal. It's just, that's the way I feel about it. I need a result. If you came to me and said, hey, we're going to divert water for sure away from Palermo so it doesn't flood, or we're going to take water out to Honcut and provide irrigation water so we could build a grape industry or something out there, which is somebody's dream out there, as we know. Yeah. He lets us know all the time, right? I'd be good with that, but I'm not good with spending $1 million making plans.
Right. So with the Palermo, which is separate from this, the Palermo Master Drainage Plan, there are some conceptual plans solutions that they'll be bringing back to the community and that we'll be bringing to the board, and there will be initial design with that, and then this information this project would expand that, which is moving water out of Palermo to minimize flooding. And then there's also the addition of potentially drainage basins or retention basins.
Yeah, I don't mean to sound like I'm egotistical or anything like that. I just frustrated that a lot of money gets spent on plans and nothing gets done. It's taken us 18 years to get domestic water out there, and now we're going to do a bunch more plans.
So go ahead.
Yeah, can you defend it? Can you convince me?
I'm going to try. I think this project is project development and design. So it's not it is a planning phase, right? I mean, it's not enough money to build something, but the first step toward a project, and the goal for all of these projects in Vina and Wyandotte Creek is that we come out of it with this, with a designed, scoped project that then you could go after implementation funding for. To date, we've had a lot of ideas, right? We have plans that have ideas and concepts and kind of sketches of projects. This project, the conjunctive use project, moves us from that into an actual define the project, begin to design it, do some of the CEQA work, I think, and permitting. And so it really is phase one of a project.
There's another aspect to this. What about the people we're collecting their money from every year? Is there any way we can do something to reduce using that money that we're collecting from the people? They're upset that we're, you know what I'm saying? We got ranchers mad at us and some irrigated people mad at us because we're collecting money from them. Is there anything we could divert this money to reduce the use of that? Help me out here.
You mean for the fees? Is that what you're saying?
You. Hey.
He's looking at you.
I threw you a
Pat.
softball.
I'm listening. I'm listening. I do. I am kind of curious. Is the strategy to then basically front load some of this work that was going to have to be done already? Because that's the one way I can see justifying a little bit. It's like if this was money that was going to have to be spent to implement, to actually build out this project, but it seems like a lot of money, especially if we were going to be able to make some of these same decisions with 10% of the same plan for $200,000 that we had budgeted. So I'm trying to figure out exactly, you know, it seems like kind of a unique opportunity. You don't stumble upon $750,000 all the time. And so I don't want to get in a rush and make sure that we're appropriately kind of just I want to make sure we're not putting the cart before the horse a little bit, I guess. And so is this money that would have to be spent for this project already? Because I am a little, it's a little gray to me, but I thought the Palermo project was already being funded. So is that?
It's a different project.
I want to deny
Yeah,
it.
there's
I want
multiple
to apply to
Palermo
something that
projects,
does
so
something.
this is a different project. However, there is collaboration to moving forward so
These guys
that they're
just
not
need to
working
leave.
separately and coming up with different ideas. If they can piggyback on each other to solve multiple problems, that's the intent of that collaboration. But 60% designs from a regulatory permitting perspective and a funding perspective, if you have 60% designs, you can pursue additional implementation and construction funding in order to actually build a project. And you can't do that with 10% design. So you can move forward. We often call it permit-ready designs. And then you can do environmental, you can do any applicable regulatory permitting, and you can apply for grants with that. They become much more shovel-ready, and that's what agencies look for. So when you have different pots of money, some are just planning money and to do feasibility studies or master plans, and then there is construction and implementation funding, and that's where moving something to 60% design allows us to fit into that category.
I have a question, and going back to a little bit in the presentation, you mentioned that South Feather Water and Power had excess water. How are they going to get it to us?
I think that's part of what they want to explore is how to.
Is that part of the
That's part of
explore
the,
how?
yeah, that's part of the feasibility
Okay,
study.
maybe I missed that a little bit, but I thought, I just been sitting there thinking, I thought, now how is South Feather going to bring water to Wyandotte Creek? If, you know, if that makes sense. And so we're going to spend money to figure out how they can give us their water?
In part for that, so it would be broken up between the three tasks in that project. So part
Yeah.
would be expanding the
I'm agree with part of the other board here. I'm a little bit concerned about the dollar amount, $742,000 or $88,000. I'm just a little bit concerned about that much money for one informational project, if you will.
Would you guys prefer if we split it up differently?
I'm kind of jaded, I guess, because I guess what it gets down to, we got the public's money, and it is the public's money, and what are we going to get? I mean, you guarantee. The other thing, there's a disconnect in my mind. Sorry, maybe I'm dense, but the county's responsible for fixing the drainage out there. We're responsible for recharging water, and now somehow we're going to help the county drain Palermo and use that water to recharge? Is that what you're saying?
It's just sharing in the work efforts because their design on that project kind of has some correlation with the regional conjunctive use project. So we're not really helping them per se. It's kind of building off of like the 10% design that they have so far. Just like we have 10% so far in our contract, but if we expanded it, we would get to have a 60% design. And I will say, so the $780,000, we have to either put it to one or somehow the different components, or it'll just stay with the state. Like, so those are like, we need a decision on that part today, right? We have that money to either reallocate or just leave it in component 5, and it'll just go back to the state. You know, like we won't have it. But of that, we can either change the allocation method that I proposed today, or
Move
keep
forward.
it. But yeah.
What is the time frame as far as there was a deadline before about when those funds, or when is there a time, when can we spend the money by? Sorry.
March 2026.
2026, okay. Okay, I'm not saying that that's going to influence anything, I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
Would it be beneficial, we have I don't know when our next meeting, if you're really wanting, we could have Ryan come and give an update to this board and presentation about the regional conjunctive use project. So that way you would see pictures of the Palermo facilities, South Feather Water and Power's Palermo facilities. You would see a map showing the Bangor facilities and how they're the canals extend through the Wyandotte Creek subbasin, and that's what we're looking at about moving water to different areas in the basin.
Don't they have to gunite all their canals now by law? They can't be passive recharge then.
I mean, Wraith at the meeting the other day, Mosley seemed fairly open to trying to expand their infrastructure into parts of the lower basin, which I think could be really beneficial, but
It could be for ag, for sure.
yeah, it just seems like a lot of money to like just figure out if like this is something that may work, and I don't understand how that all works, so forgive me, but it seems like a pile of money just for a concept basically, and I'm wondering if there's a way I don't know.
It does include design, right, Ryan? So 60%.
Yeah, it does include design, and we'll be proposing like a suite of projects, right? Some will be more readily implementable like right away. Some will take more design work. But our goal will be to focus on projects that will
Goal is to spend $700,000, young man. I mean, come on. That's what's bothering me. I mean, that's exactly what I don't want to see, is a whole thing of projects that aren't going to get done. I mean, we don't need to spend money just because we have it. It's really bothering me. It's like a core thing. I mean, I've seen this happen before. You know, there's a plan to bring irrigation water to the south of the county that was developed in the 1940s. They have it in South Feather in the basement. It includes several lakes, canals, ditches, everything. It never was implemented. So I don't want to be that person again. I think you're going to have to prove to me, the rest of you can vote for it, but I'm not going to vote for this until you prove to me there's a definite need and a use that benefits this basin that we're taking care of. You know, spending money to design stuff that's never implemented is just not good for me. I've seen it too much. I mean, sorry. I mean,
we gave a presentation, and we can come back next meeting and do a similar one. But there is a 1,000-acre subbasin that we want to try to address, and that's included in GSP. Count for climate change is 2,000 acre feet. So there is some.
Show me a series of retention ponds and lakes along these streams, and you got me, because that'll make sense. It'll recharge to a degree. You might have to punch a well, though, because of the clay, right? I mean,
And I do think there's kind of two main jobs in the subbasin. One is the data gaps and the monitoring. So you could take this 800,000 and say we want more of that. And then the second piece is, you look up and down the valley where groundwater levels are stable and we don't have problems is where surface water is being utilized, and reliable surface water supplies are used for irrigation. And we have an opportunity in this subbasin to use existing not utilized surface water. I mean, in some ways, it's an investment in the future stability of water levels in this subbasin. So with grant money, I get it. It's not our local dollars, but it is, through the state, to explore any of those ideas of how to get water in the ground, or really more directly, the best way is to just get people using surface water and not using groundwater. That's what this project looks at. It looks at what exchange agreements would be needed to move that water around the subbasin, and what infrastructure, conveyance. I think, to your point, maybe we don't want a suite of projects. It's like, don't do that. Just hone in on the best one and get that as far down the line as possible.
that makes way more sense to
So
me.
that we can go after.
And Doctor, your
Infrastructure
first part of
money.
your statement kind of hit what is bothering me, is that if we used all this money for protect the people that are paying us, that's what we got to do. We got to help the people that are paying us, because we're charging them per acre, right? To prevent them having us to come back and say we need more per acre. That makes a lot of sense to me.
And
That hits right in the wellhouse with me. Wheelhouse.
well,
It's a deep
I
subject.
Think the
I think it's
grant,
wheelhouse, Bill.
the wheelhouse.
But you know what I'm trying to say?
The
And then
grant
maybe-
is doing that already. So I think we've maximized the relief through the periodic evaluation. That's something that this subbasin has to do, and we have grant money to do it out of this pot. And the annual reporting is being paid for. That's compliance reporting. This grant's going to pay for that. So I think those things that are
That's
in the
just
budget.
We can do that first, and then
Yep.
I think a more
It's already
targeted
covered.
project, something that maybe working with the county to get the water out of Palermo or something. Not a suite of projects. I'm sorry. I just, they'll never get done.
Yeah.
It's
So
taken
if you put
18
it
years
in-
to get a solution to, couldn't get a sewer out there, and what, 4 or 5 years we knew we wanted water? It's been at least 5 years on just getting the water there. So let's get something we can get done, and then I'd be really more amicable to voting for it. Can we do that?
I
You
mean, I
guys-
think
are you-
that's the thought.
What's the rest of the board think? I'll do
dumping
whatever.
it
I'm
in
not-
regional conduct.
I shouldn't be like taking everybody's time out.
Personally, I'd like, I guess it's still on, I'd like a little more time to think about this, if you will, and do just a little more research. It's a lot of money just on a 3-minute and nothing against your presentation at all, but that's a lot of money to spend on a 3-minute presentation. And that,
So
yeah.
I agree. And so developing that infrastructure is clearly kind of a key component to like bringing more surface water into the basin. And that seems like kind of our golden ticket to our water deficit. But if we put this money into regional conjunctive use, does that just giving LWA a check saying here's $700 however many $1,000 to just go and look for things, or is it that money's there and as they bring things to us then we can start working through it? It doesn't necessarily give them or give someone else that money directly and
Correct.
just say here's a blank check, go for it. What I'm trying to figure out exactly how the process works.
I think you're on the same page.
Okay.
What if we schedule, because there is a little bit of a timing issue, obviously we have to expend these funds and we just barely have a year and a half to do it. Could we schedule a meeting in December where we have Ryan come and talk about the regional conjunctive use project, where we're at? I can also give an update on the Palermo master drainage study, so you can see how they're separate but could be integrated to have design concepts for
I'd be all
drainage
for
solutions.
that if
Okay.
it was that specific project.
Yes.
I don't want to see money wasted on things we can never get to.
Okay, and then we can address the request at that meeting. We don't have a meeting scheduled in December now, but can we do that so we can come back and?
I'll lay another bomb on you. I actually had a study done on the drainage in Palermo about probably 17 years ago. It was never implemented. It was never followed up on. Nobody knows where it is. So I'm really.
Well, I won't lose this one.
Well, no, you're not. Not if I get reelected again, you won't. All right,
So can we just do a meeting in December? I know that's the holidays, but maybe like this. I don't know if the Chambers is available on like the second week of December, but we can.
I can do it if you guys can do it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. I mean,
And hey, it's not personal. It's not personal. It really is. I don't dislike people. I just don't want to spend money on stuff that I know will be in a drawer forever. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm really want to think more. I
Can
want to
we
have a
have
conversation
Rafe
with
there?
you to convince me that we've done everything we can to keep the people that are paying for this basin whole. You know, I don't want to miss an opportunity to spend some of this money in a way that would help them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then you said
And you,
have
Christine, I'm
the
sorry.
general manager from South Feather.
I think I'm wondering if it would help
Mm-hmm.
kind of streamline this process, because obviously this is my problem, but like I'm struggling to figure out exactly how the different, like some of these things are delineated and what the different funding is. And then also like when it comes down, so I think this meeting would be helpful for me. And then having him there to say like, this is kind of what we're thinking and this is what's feasible. It seems like it would kind of take out some of the guesswork and maybe help explain a few things. And I don't know, it seems like we need to do something with that money. I don't know, I'm just having a hard time figuring out. It's like just putting in stuff, so.
All right, so I'll hold myself accountable to meet with you
Okay.
between now and the next meeting. And thank you very much. Thank you. All right. I screwed that up for us, huh? Okay, introduction to the Butte County. Oh, any public comment? Introduction to Butte County drought resistant. Oh, I do. Come on up.
Sorry, I don't want to sidetrack things. In terms of your...
You can identify yourself if you care to.
Yeah, Christopher Chudy. I'm a farmer here in Butte County.
Okay.
Close enough to the deadline, you're saying shovel ready. If design is in place, can that money roll over into implementation? No. Okay.
No.
Hey, great question. Thank you.
Right? Yeah.
Okay, any other public comment?
So that's the concern about the timeline, is that we have to have it designed, we have to have a feasibility study done, design it finished, and construction started before March of 2026.
Right, we would need to expend funds by March of 2026. So I guess the question, if it were shovel-ready design and we had funds available, is that what you're asking, Cheetah? Within that time frame, then yes, we could. If there was extra funds to do that, then we could start something.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was asking. It was supposed to be a question.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Is that the issue with the timeline for the GSA spending that grant funding is that we have to have shovels in the ground before 2026 in order to utilize that grant funding? Like, we can't,
If we have a shovel-ready project and money to construct, we just need to expend the funds by the end of March of 2026.
okay,
So
okay, thank you.
hopefully that answered your question.
It's a reimbursement grant.
Right.
So you spend the money and then you send them what you spend it on and they send you a check back. So we have to do all the work, whatever we're gonna do and try to get reimbursed for by March of 26.
Got it, okay.
What if they don't reimburse us?
Well, we are working really hard to make sure that whatever we.
You make more money than I do, so. Okay, I'll shut up. The deep pocket law. Number 7, introduction to Butte County Drought
All right.
Resilience Plan.
That will be me. So thank you, Chair Connolly. All right. Okay, let's bring in the. So this is about SB 552, which is the Drought Resilience Plan. And, it says presentation to Vina, but this is presentation to you all. And I guess I can control the monitor. All right. So SB 552 was passed back in 2021, and it was the result of work that had been done previously as part of the 2012-2016 drought, which was AB 1668. And so they made recommendations to be passed as SB 552, which is the requirement for a drought resilience plan. So these new requirements came online in September of 2022, and it focused on 3 different areas: small suppliers, counties, and then the state had things that it also needed to do. And focusing on counties, so what the county is required to do is have a drought task force, which the county already had in place at the time of SB 552. So the county met that requirement, and it also required that the county develop a drought resilience plan. The county already has a drought preparedness and mitigation plan, and so we kind of met the requirement, except that the county is required to address domestic wells and state small water systems. And so the county's existing plan does not include those 2 components specifically. So, and the reason why that I'm bringing this to you is part of the requirements of preparation of the drought resilience plan is that we involve the county involved. So I have my county hat on, that we involve the GSAs in the process. And at different parts of the state, they're involving GSAs in different ways. And the county is looking to just involve the GSAs as kind of an advisory and prepare and present information as we move along in the process, particularly with regard to domestic well owners that are in the basins and some of their concerns with wells going dry and things like that. So just kind of bridging the 2 between the county's activities and things that the GSA is doing with regard to implementation of the GSP. So a lot of activity happening around domestic wells. So what the county has done is pursued drought technical assistance from the Department of Water Resources, and they have a consultant on board. Department of Water Resources has Stantec, and the county is working, the Department of Water and Resource Conservation and the Drought Task Force is working with Stantec to update their drought plan. So we're currently in the process of updating that plan. So some of our initial activities is working with the Drought Task Force to adapt and change the Drought Task Force if necessary. We have some of the Drought Task Force. There's no longer some of the people that were assigned to be on the Drought Task Force, so we've adjusted the makeup of the Drought Task Force. I'll discuss that in a minute. And we also kind of kicked off the whole process back in September with the Drought Task Force. And then we're currently doing a risk assessment to develop baseline conditions and update our risk assessments. Back a couple years ago, when I first started with the county, we did a drought impact analysis study, and that identified impacts to domestic wells associated with drought. So we'll be updating that per some of DWR's new information that they have and some of their requirements. So right now we do have a drought task force that was set in place back in 2004 with the adoption of the original drought hazard preparedness plan. Like I said, we have changed the makeup of that by exchanging. There used to be the Butte Basin Water Users Association and a representative there, and we've switched that out, having the Director of Development Services as part of the drought task force. The Drought Task Force also identified a subcommittee of some of those members to help facilitate the preparation of the drought plan. So the drought resilience plan will have, it's a pretty standard format, and we'll kind of make it county specific, but it'll talk about the Drought Task Force and other entities that might be involved depending on different droughts. The current plan identifies having just the Drought Task Force involved if it's we call it phase 1 of drought, but if droughts may get longer. Most of our droughts are about multi-year droughts, last about 3 years, and then we get some wet years, and that's kind of the cycle. Couple dry years, wet years, and as you know. And then really updating our risk assessment and understanding the impacts of drought on domestic wells, and then just identifying some short-term response actions of when drought occurs. As you may know, the county has programs where we have had water hauling services for dry wells, provided temporary storage tanks for dry wells, and so those would be short-term response, and then if there's developing a long-term mitigation strategy as part of drought response, and then other implementation considerations that we might want to think about. So again, the current drought elements are just identifying risk and some of those short, interim, and long-term solutions addressing domestic wells, as well as state small water systems. And so some of the things that the plan will consider is consolidations with existing water systems. Palermo is a perfect example of where, for their clean water consolidation project, we're consolidating that community and hopefully connecting them to South Feather Water and Power System, looking at some domestic well mitigation programs. The county currently has the DROP program for assisting residents that are having domestic well dry well issues, and then any other interim drinking water solutions. So, and then identifying any other funding sources available to implement the plan or respond to drought. So again, working with the GSAs to identify and fill data gaps, having a well inventory data. So even Ryan mentioned some of their well inventory that they have created. We might be able to utilize some of that information. And again, doing a risk assessment to domestic wells based on a variety of vulnerability indicators. So the department already tracks many of these things. So for the Board of Supervisors as well as the GSA, so some collaboration there, and just making sure that we have consistent mitigation between what the drought plan says and some of the activities perhaps of the GSAs in response to dry wells, and we don't want to conflict in that in some of our hopefully policies and implementation for impacts to dry wells. And then identifying opportunities for consolidation with water districts. And so ultimately what we're hoping to have is a draft of the drought resilience plan or chapters in March. Eventually it will go to the Drought Task Force will make a recommendation to the Water Commission for for approval, and then the Water Commission will review the drought plan, and then we'll bring it before the Board of Supervisors. So during that process, we will probably bring updates to this board and get input from this board as well. And that is it. This is for information, if anyone has any
The
questions.
irony, it's raining like
I know.
3 inches a day.
Yeah, we're planning for drought and flood all at the same time.
Yeah. Any questions or comments by board members? Any public comment? Seeing none, I'll move on to the next item. Thank you. I think our task force did pretty well, actually.
All right.
Consideration of appointment of Wyandotte Creek GSA Program Manager as GSA Administrator and Groundwater Sustainability Plan GSP Manager.
All right. So as part of the Joint Powers Agreement, we identify a plan manager as well as a GSA administrator. And according to the JPA, or the Joint Powers Agreement, it can be one and the same person, or it could be two individuals. Historically, originally, Kelly Peterson served as the GSA administrator, and Christina served as the plan manager. And ultimately, what that it just means is that is the contact person, that if DWR had questions, that they would call Christina or Kelly, for that matter. So what we're proposing is that now that the GSA has a program manager, Dylan being the program manager, that we appoint Dylan as the GSA program manager, or the GSA administrator and plan manager, and we just register her as the point of contact with DWR.
You still smiling? Any questions or comments? Any public comment? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to appoint her.
I'll make a motion that we approve the appointment of the GSA Program Manager as a GSA Administrator and Plan Manager.
Second.
Sure you want to do it?
No, that's
Dylan's
that's
not
Becky.
here.
It would be Dylan. Dylan, unfortunately, is not here today
not
because
here?
she's out sick.
Okay, sorry.
She wouldn't be able to talk more
That's
than
my
10 minutes.
confusion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. Consideration of the 2025 Wyandotte Creek GSA Board Advisory Committee meeting calendar.
So in your packet, there is a meeting calendar for, are we doing both at the same time? Yes. For both the board meetings as well as the advisory committee meetings, with about 5 board meetings, pretty much almost alternating months, where you have February, April, May, August, and November. The May meeting would serve more as for budget purposes and things like that. And then with the Wyandotte Creek advisory committee meeting, hopefully prior to, if they need to review or make recommendations, then we would bring that to this board. So the meeting calendar is there in your packet.
Anybody need to change anything? Or? I'm good. Any public comment on this matter? Do we need to approve this?
Yes.
All right.
I move that we adopt the proposed meeting schedule.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say aye. Nay, whatever. We're just a good group here. Reports and correspondence, GSA Program Manager update.
Since Dylan isn't here, and I don't know specifically what she was going to talk about, we'll skip that unless you guys can think of anything. Okay. Also, in your packet is the financial status report. I will note that there is a typo on the second page of that, where it still has the Vina logo, but it is the Wyandotte Creek's information there with the financial status report. And Dylan will continue to give updates about the financial status of the the GSA. And then we also, I'm just going to go through the list, and then at the end, if anyone
Go
has
ahead.
questions. Also provided for you today was the independent auditor's report. We usually do two, I think they did it for the last 2 years. That's been provided to you as well as posted on the website. So we'll continue to do the auditor's report as required. And then we also included the county's Department of Public Health's quarterly well summary in your packet. So as the department gets those, we'll pass it on to the GSA so that you can see the status of either well permits that have been issued or dry wells and different things that that the Environmental Health Division tracks with regard to wells. That's it. That's my report.
Okay. There's no Public Health Department quarterly well summary. Oh, we read that. It's in there.
Yeah.
Public comment. You can speak on anything not on the agenda. We cannot take action. Look at you guys. Whip you into shape, I guess. I don't know. Let's adjourn. We're going to have a special meeting next month, though.
Yeah, in December.
Please.
Yes.
And then I'm going to